Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of What's Up. All right, so today we'll have a special guest, but before he starts talking, hey Sungyun.
Hello, Youngjun.
So you want to tell our viewers what you've been doing this week, or just like what you've been up to during this quarantine? Because I feel like for me, like it just changes every week by week.
Uh, I have been doing schoolwork. It's currently middle of finals week at Case, so actually I don't have any finals, but I've been working on like final reports for research and for my classes. I'm also working on a project. I went to Home Depot today to buy some stuff. So maybe I will talk about the project later on in the future. But yes,
When
that's what
it's
I've been up to.
somewhat more developed.
Yes,
Because right now
exactly.
it's in the prototype, right?
Yeah. I don't want to like hype it up before I've done anything.
Right, because it may or may not work, right? So,
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
you gotta stay safe.
Yes.
All right. I mean, I guess for me, like this week, I started making a lot of music. So I've made two songs. And so I mean, I didn't realize how fun music making would be, but I thoroughly enjoy it, and I think I'm planning on just keep making more music. I haven't told or showed that many people my songs just because I don't want to hype it up too much because it's kind of like poor production, I would say. Um, I didn't know how hard like mixing and like producing music would be, but yeah, that's pretty much what I've been doing this week.
Boy, I would say I don't know like when you're planning on releasing it, but like once you do, I think it's gonna be pretty popular. I was
Um,
one of the people that listened to it so far, and I think it's pretty good. So
it is definitely not as good. I mean, there's variations in sound quality. I'll just say that.
okay, I
lyrics,
mean
I think lyrics are good. It's just sound quality is a little bit iffy.
that's fair. That's fair. I mean, I don't think you're not
Um,
like a professional, so like I think that's fine. Like the sound,
right.
even though it's not like super good quality, it's decent. I didn't like have any. I didn't feel like it took away from the music.
Yeah. I mean, it's just for my own like fun, and if someone else can enjoy it as well, then more power like to them and myself. But yeah, it's just
Hmm.
for like enjoyment. But yeah, should we start off by introducing our guest?
Yes, let's do it.
All right, our first guest is one of our closest friends and colleagues from undergrad. He's currently in his first year in a top 50 med school in the US. In his free time, he develops his skills as a gamer, playing a variety of games from League of Legends to Animal Crossing. He is in the top 15% of all League of Legends players currently reached platinum and currently aspires to be a Pokemon master. We would like to welcome our newest additional member of our podcast, June.
Hey guys, thank you.
Yay!
Yay!
Thanks for having me, guys.
How was that hype? Was that good enough? Was that like
It was maybe
decent?
too much hype. I just want to make sure that everyone knows that I wasn't the one who planned this introduction. It was completely Youngjun, but as he mentioned, I'm a med student, and I used to go to college with these guys back in undergrad as an engineer, and then as he mentioned, I'm clearly a gamer, and I have self-identified as a gamer since early childhood, and I still
Beginning of
game as
time.
well. Yeah, since the beginning of time, and I still game even in medical school. But contrary to what's been indicated, I do other things as well. So if you have any questions or thoughts about things like playing the cello, doing tennis, or any professional basketball stats, especially amidst this pandemic, feel free to hit me up. Oh, and any good shows to watch on Netflix. I've been watching a lot, so happy to
So if
talk
you
about
yeah,
that stuff.
if you want to reach out to him, definitely DM our Instagram or I guess my Instagram. I'm thinking about like maybe we should create our own like Instagram page just so or like profile so people can like reach out to us instead of having to reach out to me. I think that would be pretty cool. But again, that's
Yeah.
like additional talk that we'll have to do. Yeah. So do you want to start off, Sungyu?
Yeah, actually, I'm just curious, like right now, June, what are you up to these days? Are you still in school or are you studying for an exam or something?
Yeah, so that's a pretty good question. I'm still technically in school. I know that undergrads have sort of all completely transitioned to that stay-at-home policy, and I know a lot of their exams have gone canceled. But for med school, we try to keep things still up and running because a lot of the things that we learn is in preparation for our official board exams, which sort of determine what type of doctor we become and whether we become a doctor at the end. So it's still really important for us to be able to like see practice patients or still attend our courses and take exams. So everything's done virtually, but I'm still continuing to do everything I would typically do for my curriculum.
Like, so a question that I had was like, you just talked about how you were trying to attend to patients, right?
Yeah.
But how do you do that virtually?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So at least in my medical school, we usually have two types of patient encounters. One is sort of a standardized patient encounter where basically we see fake patients. So these are like actors or actresses who sort of fake out a disease process that our class wants us to learn. And we would see these patients as physicians in training, where we would like take their history, do physical examinations on them, and sort of come up to them with a diagnosis and assessment and plan. And we're still able to do those types of encounters virtually through things like telehealth. Do you guys know what telehealth is?
I do not know what that is.
Isn't that basically where you I guess so-called fake patients would just call and then talk about their symptoms, and then you would just like direct them to like things to do or like self assessment checks?
Yeah, so it can vary. It's definitely not just limited to like fake patients. Like telehealth has been instituted in a lot of different medical fields and scenarios. It really just depends on having an appropriate scenario for it. So it's not applicable to everything, but in situations or diagnoses where you're able to guide the patient into talking to you about like their symptoms or doing like physical maneuvers on the camera that you're able to then observe. It sort of is another arm that we can do as doctors to be able to see patients, especially during these trying times. So we see our standardized patients still in those types of encounters, and that got reinstituted today. But we don't get to see live patients, so actual patients, through these types of encounters, just because those require a lot more investment from physicians who watch over us and making sure that we do the right thing. So we're able to do it in person, but since we can't do anything in person right now, that part of our curriculum has been not performed currently.
I see. Okay, so it's basically like a virtual like checkup essentially.
Exactly. That's what we're doing right now, but only for standardized patient scenarios.
Since you're in med school now, like as a med student, do you have like ever second thoughts about your career path? So like, has anything changed in terms of your mindset from when you were an undergrad transitioning now to a med student, in terms of like how motivated you feel into like continuing this career path?
That's a really good question. I would say yes and no. Sorry, that's sort of a very ambivalent.
That's what everyone else says.
Yeah, well, so I mean, the thing is when you apply to medical school and you sort of think to yourself why you're pursuing medicine, in the end, medicine is a very rewarding field. Like you get to see people who are hurting and you're able to help them, right? So it has a lot of just personal gratification. And for me, that was the main reason why I went into medicine, alongside the fact that I get to employ skills like problem solving, or in some cases engineering or things like that, where I get to use sort of my real life skills in seeing patients and helping them out. The thing about my mentality that's changed in medicine is you talk about motivation, and I thought one of my primary motivations to do well in med school would be that things that I would learn would be more important to me now because it could actually determine a patient's life. So in that way, motivation has increased for me. But at the same time, medical school is a lot more grueling and a lot more. I think a lot of people, way people describe it is that you put your mouth to a fire hose and you just sort of let the fire hose go. But that's honestly like how much knowledge we're trying to learn right now. So there's never really a break. You don't really ever stop, especially in your first year. So I think in terms of the fact that we're learning so much material and we have to spend hours upon every day to be able to learn that material to an adequate level, it sort of drives up your motivation a bit. But I'm hoping that by the end of this, that I'll still come out with my intrinsic motivation that I'm here to help people and I want to continue to learn to the best way possible for that.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Mhm.
yeah, so I think like what you were talking about, like in terms of motivation. So
Mhm.
to me, it seems like when you're in med school, like it's what other people say, just many, many hours on top of studying every single
Yeah,
day,
yeah.
just to keep
Mhm.
up. So then,
Mhm.
I guess to match in with the title, living life as a gamer during med school. So can you talk
Yeah.
about like kind of like balancing those? Like in terms of you said you have hours of studying, but also like you do contribute a decent, significant portion of your time also to gaming. So yeah, so can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I guess significant is relative because, yeah. So, I mean, obviously, I have an opportunity to relax a bit more and to game a bit more just because everything's virtual. And I think that happens with a couple of my like other class as or other members of my class as well who are watching Netflix a lot more or gaming a lot more, things like that. But yeah, so I mean, gaming growing up has always been like a really big stress reliever for me. So it was important for me to be able to keep that up in med school and not lose track of the things that I personally enjoy doing in my life. So in terms of balance, I think it's just really about knowing what my limits was, because like especially because I did BME or biomedical engineering back in undergrad alongside pre medicine, so it was definitely not the easiest track of education to go through. Like I had to learn a lot about like how to balance my social life with my education, and with like things like performing well. And I think I took that a lot into medical school where I understood like, okay, how much can I study before I get exhausted and where it just doesn't make sense to me anymore? Because at that point, I know I should be taking a break and either playing cello, playing tennis, or in a lot of cases, gaming. So I think a lot of it was just understanding my own limits and making sure that I didn't sort of overexert myself each day. So yeah.
I see. So just like making like so setting a limit for studying and then like outside of that then you would just like game, right?
No, I wouldn't say exactly that. You make it sound like I just study and then when I don't study, I game. No, it's not. I think it's more like,
I mean you do other stuff, but I'm just saying like
yeah,
that's
yeah,
one of the
yeah.
things that you do.
And I mean, not every day is going to look the same. And I think one thing is that you do have to be flexible. And I think that's one of the great things about gaming is that it can be done really any time of the day, right? Like it's not like tennis where you can only play at certain times of the day, certain times of the year. Um, and okay, but no, but like the thing is that like when it comes to studying, not every day is gonna look the same. Like sometimes you just wake up with a fresh mind, ready to start, and then you crank out 8 hours of studying a day. And some other days you just don't really feel like it's a productive day for you, and you only end up doing 1 or 2 hours or no hours at all. And I think knowing that at certain points of the time it's best to just not force it and not to overexert yourself and pursue other hobbies is important. So yeah.
So do you feel like
Mhm.
you mentioned like some days you'll study like 8 hours a day and sometimes it's like a lot less. So
Yeah.
do you feel like there's like an average hours a week that you could like estimate that you study? Or is it usually pretty like varied each week?
It's pretty varied each week depending on what the contents of each week are. So there are like some times where I have 22 lectures I need to study for an exam versus only like 9 lectures for an exam. So it changes up a lot depending on our curriculum like calendar. But on average, I would probably say I study about 4 to 5 hours a day or something like that. But in reality, I probably should be studying a bit more.
So like 4 to 5 hours, is that including lectures as well?
Yeah. So each of our lectures is about an hour. Oh, sorry. I guess that's somewhat including lectures. So we usually have about 3 hours or 4 hours of lecture each day in the morning. And then I usually try to review those lectures a couple more hours in the afternoon. And
Okay.
yeah, I have a pretty bad habit of also cramming a bit. So on the weekends, you can easily see me like cranking out like 13 hours of studying or something like that, just reviewing everything before the exam.
Okay. So it's like, I feel like that's pretty solid. What about how many hours a week do you game?
I'd probably say about like 8 or 9 hours. These days it's been a bit more because of just because I'm home all the time. So these days it's been more like 12 hours ish each week, something like that.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I last semester I recorded how many hours a week that I actually was productive. And I mean, you hear about people doing like these crazy work weeks, like, you know, like maybe like residents can do like, I don't even know, like what's an average like resident work week?
Gosh,
It's like 80 hours a week. That's like the what is the official like standard, but you can go more or below it.
I think it depends on the specialty a lot. So like things like ED, like emergency department or surgery is going to be more hour intensive just because like you have on call and things like that. But I think like I know a lot of specialties have 80 hours. I've heard a lot of people doing 60 hours a week, which is still a lot. But yeah.
So I heard for residents, like they each month they're expected to work like a certain amount of hours, and they just like divide that. So like if you need to work, let's say 100 hours in a month, then like if you just do like 50 hours one week, 50 hours the next week, then you don't have to work the last 2 weeks. That's just something like I discovered. So like people like are like fluctuate a lot.
Right. And there's usually a lot of negotiation too, where it's like you just negotiate with fellow residents and you do tackle those types of hours as a team.
But I think aren't there like like you said, like some resident programs are better or like a little bit easier in terms of hours than others. I think dermatology is an easier or like a fewer hours.
I don't know about dermatology residency. I mean, I know that the dermatology like specialty itself, when you become a practicing physician, it does have a more manageable work schedule than something like neurosurgery or something like that, just because on-call visits, a lot of dermatologists have normal looking work schedules.
Like 9 to 5.
Yeah, I mean, it's not always 9 to 5. I used to work with a dermatologist who used to work from like 7 or 8 to 6 or 7 p.m. And it really depends on like how many, like what you decide to do also outside of just practicing in clinic. Like some people decide to do research, some people decide to teach. And there's a lot of variability in how your day can look.
I see.
Yeah. But Sungin, you were going to ask me a question about the hours. So you were saying something.
Oh yeah. So like when I recorded how much like I studied per week, studied or worked, and like thinking about how much people like as residents work, for example, I was really almost like embarrassed because I only worked usually around like on a good week, like 40 hours, maybe like 45 on a really good week. And so I was actually surprised. It actually like just doing like the normal 40 hours, that already made me really tired in a week. And so like and I probably spent like another 20 hours a week just watching like YouTube videos. So like, I don't know. I think it's just very impressive what people can do, but also like, I think what you're saying is pretty important. Like, you should definitely take time to like pursue other hobbies just to like relax and don't push yourself too much.
Right. Yeah. And I know that like the reason why like I have to end up studying so much is because I'm sort of called to study that much. But I mean, I used to work a 40-hour job too back when I used to take a gap year before I entered medical school. And that, it's exactly how you describe it. It's just I'm exhausted by the end of the day and I don't really do anything else. It's usually I work, I cook, I maybe work out, and then I go to sleep and I just start the day again. So it's definitely like, I don't think it's a negative to anyone that they aren't working 60 to 80 hours a week. I don't think we're really supposed to function that way. Yeah. And I think that type of schedule is a reason why physician burnout is such a big problem in medicine.
I think they're trying to limit it, or I know there are like petitions and like people trying to protest against like those long like hours.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely become a lot more exposed, I think, nowadays, especially with things like social media and things like that. A lot of people have gotten a lot more aware of how rigorous a doctor's schedule could be, and how it could lead to things like burnout.
And it also, like, if you think about it from the patient aspect, if you're like physician or like your resident is like super tired and doesn't have enough energy to think or function, then like poor like patient outcome could occur. And I think that's also another point that people are trying to make against having those long hours, because no one can function like perfectly like high level in those hours.
100%. And I think that goes back to what Sungyeon was saying about working 40 hours a week and still feeling exhausted. The difference between that and a physician or a resident isn't that necessarily we're built differently and we can keep functioning after 40 hours. It's that sometimes we just continue to push our bodies where we're not working at an optimal level, but we still have to work past 40 hours because we have still patients to see or things like that.
It's like, I have so much respect for like, I heard some nurses these days, as well as like other people in healthcare, because of coronavirus, they're working like 12 or it was even more. It was like really crazy number of hours per shift.
Yeah.
It's like really amazing.
It really is. And I think a lot of the doctors and like the nurses who see those types of patients, they have to limit themselves. Like if they have families at home, they can't really just go back to them and let sort of like lead a normal lifestyle. Like they have to go through like disinfecting themselves, making sure that they don't get their families infected. And I think a lot of them live with like a sort of an innate fear that like, oh, what if I bring the virus back home to my family? So there's a lot of different struggles that the healthcare industry is going through right now. So mad respect to everyone who's practicing out there.
Yeah, if you're listening and you're on the front line, thank you so much for what you do. We can't thank you enough. So I think like, because we have a lot of undergrads listening to the podcast, from what I saw. So we're kind of almost out of time. So could you just give any advice that you have to like undergrads or potentially anyone who's interested in pursuing medicine? Just as open-ended as that.
I mean, I just giving a shout out back to that Instagram. If you guys have any questions that you want me to answer when we have more time, or you want me to answer offline, I'm always happy to address any questions that you might have. I think my biggest thing I would recommend undergrads is that there's a lot of pressure for us to be able to, or a lot of pressure for us, at least a lot of pressure for me when I was growing up, that like you have to be a physician or a lawyer or like some type of high paying occupation to succeed in life. And I think sometimes when we grow up and we pick those specialties or what we want to do for a career, we often fall back on what we're pressured into picking rather than what we really want to pick and what suits our interests. So I know what I would just recommend to those undergraduates or people who are looking into physicianship, I really encourage you to go out into the field, to shadow doctors, to see what it's like, and to really experience it for yourself and make sure that you enjoy patient care before you start delving into that. And I think once your passion's there and in the right way, I think everything else will fall in place for you. So yeah.
Shadow after the pandemic.
Yes,
Or
shadow
once everything
after
has,
pandemic.
like,
And I
settled
think,
down.
well, so the other cool thing is that there's a ton of YouTube videos now for like shadowing or like seeing surgeries and things like that. So I would honestly I would recommend watching those types of videos and seeing if it's stuff that you enjoy. And if you do, like, yeah, that could be another way to expose yourself.
That's the thing. Like, so when I did my interview, to make my composite letter, I talked a lot about, because I don't have that many shadowing hours, but I told them I watched a lot of YouTube.
Okay, well, maybe that's not the right way to say it.
I mean, right.
Yeah, because nothing really quite beats interacting with a patient, because in the end, that's why we become physicians, or like that's why I became a physician, why a lot of my classmates became physicians, is we like talking to people and we like caring for them in a way that we can't do with many other careers. So videos are a great way for you to learn more, but it doesn't necessarily replace you being actually able to interact with patients.
Yeah, so like I think like the main takeaway is just like do with what you can now, like watching those videos and like looking at like the day in the life of like doctors, because like right now we really can't go out and like shadow doctors, so making the best of what you have.
Right.
Any last comments, Hongyu?
If you're an engineer, I'm sorry, but you cannot shadow. No, I'm just kidding. There's a lot of resources online for engineers if you're an engineering student. So like, and I know a lot of people this summer had like canceled internships or canceled like work opportunities. But there's a lot of stuff you can do on your own. I know for electrical engineering, there's some really cool projects that you can do just from like Googling stuff on the internet. I mean, you should probably buy some parts, but it wouldn't be a huge expense. So like, yeah, if you're like someone who has a canceled internship, like don't despair. You have a lot of resources at your fingertips, and the projects that you do on your own can honestly be just as good as something you would do like at a company. So definitely, yeah, like try to make use of those Googling skills that you have.
Yeah. And I definitely want to second, because I used to look into engineering jobs back when I was half considering it, is really learn like different types of softwares. Like I know like SolidWorks is really big for mechanical engineering, and like any type of language, like a programming language, is really useful too, especially when everything is transitioning to sort of a virtual playing field. So those are all things that you can definitely mess around with at home. So I would highly recommend that, to add on to Sungyun's words.
But yeah, I think we're right on time, actually. 30 minutes, nice. So thank you everyone who's listening. If you haven't, please follow us on Apple Music, Spotify. I think we're on like a whole variety of different platforms. But yeah, make sure to check us out in the future. And yeah, we'll see you guys next time.